Okay, let's unpack this. You've brought us a stack of material looking at, well, a really big question, right?
Yeah.
How are businesses today managing to operate faster, more efficiently, and with way less overhead than before? It feels like the whole game of starting and running a company is changing.
It really is a transformation. And looking at the sources, it seems like there are these three uh, key forces pushing it forward.
Okay.
Human-centered design, lean startup methods, and probably the most obvious one, the engine behind a lot of it, technology.
Right. And these aren't just like academic ideas, are they? The stuff you shared shows their actual practical methods. People are using them right now to build businesses differently.
Exactly. Very practical.
So our mission for this deep dive, let's say, is to pull out the really important bits from your sources, to get a handle on what it means to be one of those, lean, mean, fighting machine businesses in 2025.
Some good. Let's maybe start with two really foundational ideas that pop up again and again in the material, human-centered design and lean startup.
All right, human-centered design, HCD. What's the main thing the sources are saying here? What's its core?
It's fundamentally about empathy. The material really hammers this home. HCD puts understanding the user first, their needs, how they behave, what motivates them. That's the absolute center. Everything else kind of flows from that user understanding.
So it's less about building what you think is cool and much more about what the user actually needs and, I guess, what they want.
Exactly. Nailed it. And the sources describe this like iterative process to get there.
Iterative how?
Well, you do research, right, to really understand the user deeply. Then you brainstorm solutions, that's ideation. Then you prototype those ideas quickly, like make simple versions. And then, crucially, you test them with actual users. And the human-centered part is that you're constantly tweaking, refining, based directly on what you learn from that user feedback.
I see. So those principles mentioned, like empathy, user-centered evaluation, iteration, inclusion, they're all just parts of that loop, that ongoing cycle.
Precisely. Empathy drives the research, right? User-centered evaluation is key for the testing part. Iteration is baked into the whole refine and repeat process. And inclusion. That's about making sure you're designing for everyone, or at least a diverse group, not just one narrow slice.
Okay.
And the goal, as the sources really highlight, isn't just to meet a need. It's to create products, services, whatever, that give people a genuinely positive experience, something they actually want to use and find easy to use.
That makes a ton of sense for making sure you build the right thing, but how do you build it quickly and prove it's actually viable without, sinking a fortune into it? That feels like where lean startup fits in.
It definitely does. Lean startup, from what we see in the material, is laser focused on speed and validation, proof.
Okay.
It's all about developing, improving your business model, your product concept really efficiently, cutting down the risk by testing your big assumptions super early.
And their main tool for that is the build, measure, learn loop, isn't it? Can you walk us through what the sources say about that? How does it work?
Absolutely. So you start by building the simplest possible version of your product, or maybe just a key feature. That's the minimum viable product, the MVP.
Right, the MVP. Heard that one a lot.
It just needs to have enough there to test your main idea, your core assumption. Then you measure. You put it out there, maybe to a small group, and see how real users interact with it. Collect actual data.
Not just asking opinions, but watching what they do.
Exactly. Real world data. And then you learn from that data. What worked, what didn't, why. And that learning directly informs your next move.
And that learning part, that's where you make the call, right? Do we pivot, like change direction because the data points somewhere else, or do we persevere? Meaning, yeah, this is working, let's keep going.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
The sources really stress this idea of validated learning. It's not just learning in theory, it's learning confirmed by real experiments with real users or customers.
Yeah.
That's what proves or disproves your hypotheses. The whole point, the big goal, is to cut waste. Avoid spending, 6 months and $1 million building some perfect, fully featured thing only to find out nobody actually wants it.
Okay, defining them separately makes sense. HCD for what to build, lean startup for how to build and validate it efficiently. But the sources suggest the real magic happens when they work together, right? That's where it gets really interesting. How do they actually combine?
Yeah, they're incredibly complementary. It's like they cover each other's blind spots. Think about it. HCD helps you figure out what problem is actually worth solving from the user's point of view before you even start building anything serious.
Okay.
So that deep user understanding you get from HCD research, it gives you a much, much stronger starting point for defining your MVP in the lean startup process.
So you're not just guessing what the MVP should be.
Right. You're basing it on actual validated user needs you uncovered. This massively lowers the risk of building completely the wrong thing right out of the gate.
Okay, so HDD helps make sure the MVP is actually aimed at the right target, solving a real pain point. And then the lean startup loop, the build, measure, learn, that gives you a framework to actually test those user-centered ideas in the real world.
Precisely. Build, measure, learn becomes the engine for doing that user-centered iteration continuously.
Yeah.
You take the data and the feedback you get from the measure and learn steps.
Yeah.
And you use it to refine the designs, the solutions, the prototypes that you first came up with through HCD's empathy and ideation work. The sources show this creates this really powerful feedback loop.
Like a virtuous cycle.
Exactly. Understanding users leads to better MVPs. Testing MVPs gives you data. That data sharpens your user understanding and leads to even better designs, and it just keeps going.
It sounds like putting them together gives you, well, the best of both worlds, really. The sources mention things like reduced risk, less waste, getting to market faster as the combined benefits.
That's the key insight, yeah.
Yeah.
You end up creating solutions that are, one, genuinely user-friendly and effective, that's HCD's strength, but two, they're also validated, sustainable, and scalable, because Lean Startup forced you to test the business side of things.
Right.
It helps make sure you're not just building the right thing, but also building it in the right way for the actual market.
So, okay, we have these powerful methods. What does this mean for how businesses actually look and operate today in 2025? This seems to be where technology really steps in as the big enabler, the engine for this whole lean approach. Barry Kukis's points on this in the sources are pretty striking.
They really are. They paint such a clear picture. The sources use this great historical contrast. Think back to, say, the 1960s. Advertising execs, like in Mad Men.
Right, lots of support staff.
Totally. Heavily reliant on secretaries for typing, filing, managing phone calls, even getting coffee or running personal errands. Their individual output was just physically limited by the tools and the whole structure back then.
You basically needed a small team just to manage the flow of information.
Exactly. Now, jump to 2025. The sources point out executives today, largely self-sufficient. They type their own emails and documents, manage digital files, schedule their own meetings, handle most communication on their smartphones, often while multitasking in meetings.
Yeah, see that all the time.
And the really stunning observation from the material is this. The capability that maybe took a staff of 10 back then, just in terms of processing information and communicating, it essentially fits in your pocket now.
Wow, that's a massive increase in what one person can do, individual leverage.
It's huge. Technology lets one person achieve an output that was just unthinkable before. The sources talk about marketing collateral, for example. With today's software, a single person can design stuff, write copy, produce videos, manage social media, run email campaigns, even do podcasting. Channels that used to require dedicated specialists, printers, studios.
All separate departments, maybe?
Right. And so marketing expenses, the material notes, are way, way lower than even just 10 years ago because these powerful tools are so accessible to individuals.
And technology completely changes the inventory game, too, for lean businesses, right?
Oh, fundamentally. Totally shifts it. For service businesses, like, say, an HVAC repair person who does need parts.
Yeah.
The sources mention they rely heavily on their distributors for just-in-time inventory. They don't keep big warehouses full of parts. They order the specific part for the job right when they need it. Minimizes all that capital tied up in physical stuff.
Okay. And what about retailers? The material talks about drop shipping.
Yep, drop shipping is a classic lean move for inventory. The sources use Barry Kukis's window treatment company as an example. They offered something like over 1,000 different items.
Wow.
But they drop shipped a lot of orders directly from their suppliers, meaning they didn't have to buy, store, manage, and ship all that physical inventory themselves. The supplier handled it. Huge cost saving.
And the modern version of that, it seems, is stuff like Amazon FBA.
Absolutely. Fulfilled by Amazon is like the ultimate example of leveraging technology in someone else's massive infrastructure to just eliminate the inventory headache for a lean business owner. The sources mention people running multi-million-dollar revenue businesses from home.
Seriously?
Yeah, because Amazon handles the storage, the packing, the shipping, the order processing. That's about as lean as it gets, operationally, all thanks to tech.
Even for businesses that are purely service-based but still need equipment, tech has changed things dramatically there, too, like that recording studio example.
That's a fantastic illustration from the sources, yeah. Barry's friend had a recording studio back in, 1987?
Right.
And back then, it needed this massive upfront investment, over $80,000, just for the core physical gear. The huge mixing board, the multi-track tape machine, racks of effects gear, bulky, expensive, specialized hardware.
A huge barrier to entry, financially.
Totally. And today, the material points out, so much of that capability is now inside a powerful laptop running sophisticated software. It's still an investment, sure, but it's a tiny fraction of what it cost 30, 40 years ago. It's really democratized access to creating high-quality audio. The power is now digital, portable, way more affordable.
So you put it all together, HCD keeping you focused on the user, lean startup keeping you fast and validated, and then technology giving individuals this incredible power. The result is this landscape where being a one-person shop or maybe a tiny, agile team is just way more possible than it ever was.
Yeah, the sources definitely show that. The barrier to entry for so many kinds of businesses has just plummeted. You can launch and run something with way less capital, way less overhead than you used to need.
And there's always a but, isn't there? The material you shared also points out a pretty big consequence, kind of a catch that comes with all this ease.
Yes, the flip side. Because technology and these methods make it so much easier and cheaper to start a business. Well, guess what?
A lot more people are doing it.
Exactly. Far more people are starting businesses. So the market just gets incredibly crowded, exponentially more competition.
And you can see that reflected in that list of popular lean home-based businesses the sources mention. These are all models built around these low-overhead, tech-enabled principles we've been talking about.
Precisely. The material lists things like drop shipping, affiliate marketing, print on demand.
Selling digital products, teaching online courses.
Yeah, freelance services, writing, graphic design, virtual assistants, social media management, bookkeeping, personal training.
Even services you might not immediately think of as tech, like maybe housekeeping or pet sitting. But technology streamlines the booking, the payments, the marketing, letting one person manage a pretty big client list efficiently. They all tap into these lean principles.
They're all practical examples, really. HCD helps them focus on creating something people actually want or need. Lean startup, maybe implicitly, helps them test their offerings without huge risk. And technology provides that essential backbone, letting them operate with a minimal physical footprint or a large staff.
So the bottom line seems to be easier entry, more entrepreneurs popping up everywhere, but way, way more competition fighting for attention.
It's definitely a new kind of competitive dynamic out there.
Which brings us nicely to a final thought, something provocative maybe for you, the listener, to chew on after all this. If technology really does allow one person to achieve so much and make starting up so accessible in this incredibly crowded market we just described, how does a truly lean business actually differentiate itself? How do you stand out from that crowd?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question now, isn't it?
Something to mull over as you continue exploring these ideas.